And I began to dive even deeper into my mindfulness practice and began meditating on a daily basis, usually 10 minutes every morning, 10 to 15 minutes every afternoon. Yoga has been a major part of my life for over 15 years. Morning, you mentioned morning after affirmations, journaling, a gratitude practice, and I began realizing, I'm a very overly analytical person, and so I always look to the numbers. How is it impacting my performance? And I began to just see a direct correlation between all of, whatever we want to call it, these, woo-woo spiritual practices and productivity at the office, crushing it on sales targets or developing new partnerships, even little things that, might not even be able to be measured directly in the short term, like just showing up to a meeting with a greater sense of ease and calm and seeing how there was a direct correlation between that state of mind and how we were able to engender new strategic partnerships or, bring a really tough deal over the finish line. And so I began to just, share this with coworkers. Uh, we ended up having the first Flow and Tell experience on my rooftop. I was living in the neighborhood of Chelsea in Manhattan in late 2018. And it really just began as a way to connect with people in a unique environment, taking something like yoga out of the traditional studio, where while there are some unbelievable studios all around New York, I think that sometimes it could be, even in the best studios, somewhat of a transactional experience. You go, you check in, you don't really talk to anybody, go into the, very intense workout, and then you leave an hour later without really communing or engaging with anybody. And so we decided to begin the experience with yoga, move it into a curated dinner experience, follow it with a live music performance by a set of featured musicians. And every experience was always curated with a discussion prompt around the theme of the evening. Themes have ranged from resilience, gratitude, perseverance, overcoming limiting beliefs, just all these things to get people talking in a more meaningful, authentic, and vulnerable way. That was how we began. I would say that's kind of Flow and Tell 1.0. 2.0 was bringing this into companies and really seeing that we could leverage these tools of mindfulness, deeper, more authentic ways of relating to one another, and then enjoying a little bit of entertainment with a live music performance or a stand-up comedian or magician. I mean, we've now kind of done it all with now the, probably 50 plus clients or so that we've worked with. Then I would say 2.0 is really shifting this into the virtual space when 2 years ago we could not do anything live. We recognized that there was a need to help teams that were experiencing heightened levels of stress and anxiety with this very unique formula to show that it's not actually woo-woo, that it has direct correlations to productivity, team cohesion, increasing retention rates, because if you see that your company's investing in you, you're going to spend longer there. We now have the fortune of doing not only team wellness programs, but private client experiences like launch events or conferences. We've even done a couple of birthday parties, which has been really fun. And then luxury retreats, which is actually where I met your partner, Amy, a few months ago down in Peru. So that's a little bit about Flow and Tell. Happy to sort of double click on that and why we really believe in the importance of mindfulness for driving tangible business outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into that. But first, just one of the things I kind of want to make an observation on, and I'm sure you'll have some follow up for this. But so one of the things that it's funny because growing up, my dad used to always say, just watch the movies to see the future, right? And it's so funny because as I get older and as more of the world kind of unfolds, especially in the last couple of years, like you were saying, it's really interesting, right? So if you look at somebody like Elon Musk, a lot of the things that he's doing today are things that would have been considered science fiction, probably not possible, things, in the not so distant past. So in terms of my whole thing is like if a human can think of it or envision it, they can probably make it so, right? And that kind of is really hard for people to accept in terms of, where we were raised. And I think that people like you are starting to open more and more eyes to this, is that you were raised as, you know, having to like follow these kind of set confined rules, that somebody in the past came up with, and was just accepted as fact, or science, or what, whatever you want to call it, or these confinements. And these kinds of exercises kind of break people's minds out of those confinements. So, how we talked about a little bit about Landmark Forum before we started. That was something that my wife introduced me to, and was kind of mind blowing. How a lot of people kind of push back on this theory, right? Like you were saying, like woo woo and all, oh, that doesn't work and all this. Do you have any tangible, any examples, experiences, people, anything that you can kind of guide people along the way in terms of maybe opening their minds up a little bit more to that way of thinking?
Sure, yeah. The first thing that, as you were talking, was coming to mind is there's a Steve Jobs quote that says, once you realize that everything around you that is non-natural, essentially every building, couch, chair, TV, was built by somebody and invented by someone that probably was not any more or less intelligent than you, your whole world begins to open up. And for me, that has always been the case. I very much was, as I shared earlier in my brief bio, very kind of bought into this corporate matrix, go get a good job, go to a good school, get good grades, and then just sort of jump into be this cog in a wheel in one of these giant conglomerates. And I don't want to discount anyone who might have a corporate 9 to 5. There's nothing wrong with it. It is a perfectly reasonable and very effective way to make a living and generate a nice income and whatnot. But I think there are those of us who feel a yearning for something greater. And we talk a lot about with our clients and on our retreats, about going corporate to conscious and really looking deeper within. You mentioned Landmark Forum. I know a lot of friends who've gone through that and have been very inspired by it. And you get a awareness of your thoughts, of your mental cognition patterns, of any loops that you might be stuck in or stories that you might be telling yourself. Um, and you're able to sort of, it's this awareness of your thoughts and a disconnection from thinking that you are your thoughts. So you can actually begin to say, all right, instead of saying, I'm nervous. No, no, no. I feel nervous in this exact moment, but I am Jonathan Stone. I am not nervous. And so you begin to form a healthy, disconnection from your emotions, which then leads to a disconnect from any of those stories or habitual patterns you've been stuck in. And so my personal example, you're asking for sort of like a concrete anecdote, was just realizing that I had created this story that I'm sort of stuck in corporate America. I've always had corporate jobs with maybe for about 95% of my career, spent a little bit of time in the startup space. I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't, be creative like that. And then I realized the only thing that was stopping me from doing that was my own limiting belief system. And so I began to just, and if to anyone listening who's maybe stuck in, what they feel is an unsatisfying job, but they have one of those passion projects that they keep just, what I call a someday project. Oh, I'll do that someday. And what we realize is that someday never comes because we always punt it to the future. Start now, start just doing what I did. I was working at Facebook, invited a dozen friends over to my rooftop for this idea to fuse mindfulness with culinary experiences, deep conversation prompts, and live music. And it just started very quickly gathering momentum until the point where about a year later, I had the confidence to leave my job to focus on that, as well as continuing a startup advisory business to consult companies in the health and wellness space, predominantly in the areas of business development and strategic partnerships. So I would say that you are, the only thing that's preventing anyone from taking that leap is really just the stories that we tell ourselves. And that's where I think the power of mindfulness to uh, gain awareness of our thoughts, to recognize when we're actually being our own worst enemy instead of our best friend, and to begin to take, more creative risks. We only have one shot at this crazy thing called life. We're all sort of making it up as we go along. Anybody who tells you otherwise is kind of just, usually blowing smoke. And so I really believe that there's power in pushing ourselves way past the preconceived limits of our comfort zone in order to, step into the life that we have imagined for ourselves.
I love it. So one of the other things that, for me, my kind of recent kind of personal awakening is my story's always been that, I'm an introvert, right? So I'm a computer guy. I sit behind my desk and I code and I don't really go out. And, if I go out, I get, drained and I don't really want to be around people. I'm not real social. And it's funny because that's the recent story, right? But in college, I mean, I was out all the time. I wasn't feeling like, oh, I can't go to that party tonight. I'm an introvert. I'm not social, So that's been a big kind of realization and then a quick change being like, well, no, I get to decide, how I'm going to feel about going out, on any given time or day or whatever. And that's just a quick example on my end on how, once you decide something, there's a lot of power in that. Just doing as simple as declaring something out loud, being like, I'm not I'm an introvert, but I love being around people, or I'm a people person, or something like that. Just declaring it can change the whole outlook of something so quickly. The other thing, Tony Robbins, which I'm sure you're completely aware of, and I always go on and find some of his YouTube videos, and every couple days if I'm having a hard day or something, I'll put that on. And one of my favorite things that he talks about is the Superman pose, right, where you kind of stand up and you put your shoulders back and your arms on your hips, and it can change your state of being like almost instantly. Once again, a lot of people consider that woo, but to me, it's like, okay, if you're going to push back on even trying that, then you're doing a disservice to yourself. What I wanted to roll into after that, kind of a long-winded explanation there, is personal connection in a post-COVID world. I mean, we went years without close connection, and as an introvert in the beginning, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. I get my food dropped in my front door. I don't have to like have an awkward look or wave or things like that with the person delivering it and things like that. And post COVID now, I think so many people now are realizing how important it is to be connected to other humans, especially in this high technology world. I mean, you have to be grateful for it. We couldn't be doing this interview right now if we had to do it in person. But can you kind of talk to the evolution that you've kind of seen in terms of how you approach people and their personal connection?
Sure. So, do you mean in the kind of client corporate setting or in just
So
sort of
meaning
like
like, have you changed any of the of the way that you're teaching people or guiding people in terms of personal connection, or maybe taking the online world offline, in terms of in other words, how to navigate that, the less how humans are connecting less in person, I guess, is an easier way to
got it?
ask.
Yeah, I think this is kind of like a twofold question because there were two major transition points. The first was March 2020, where as a live events business, we just watched everything plummet to zero, like a lot of other industries, when this whole pandemic started. And everybody was feeling confused, certainly heightened levels of stress, anxiety. I know I was feeling it. I was also just keeping my finger on the pulse, connecting with friends that were still working, full time, either corporate or startup jobs. And that's where, I always love telling the story that I it was like I don't want to go back and apply to full-time jobs. There's got to be a way to salvage this business. Maybe we can actually take these formulas that we've created for in-person and shift them to virtual. And we began to create, I started putting a one-pager together, um, in our, creative platform, working with my head of marketing on it. And before we were done, two companies reached out, Pearson and a government consultancy called HWC, and they said, "Hey, this is probably around mid-April 2020, about a month after COVID was, announced, after and shutdown had really begun." And they said, "Hey, I've seen what you've been building with Flow and Tell over the last year. Man, my company is more stressed than ever. Have you thought of bringing this in a virtual context?" And I was literally looking at a one-pager draft that said, "Given the heightened levels of stress and anxiety, Flow and Tell has adapted its live offering into the virtual space." And so I said, "Your timing is impeccable. We just closed the doors on, opened the doors on our virtual offering. I'll send you our one pager as soon as I get home." And of course, I was then like vigorously finishing the one pager to get it back to the clients, as any entrepreneur hustle would say. You got to just sort of build it first and then ask questions later. And so I shipped it out, and that was our first two virtual clients that we did engagements with a week later. And now they've been ongoing for the last couple of years. And then the second answer to the question is, now we're sort of opening up our world again, and it's a very exciting. Thank you for sharing vulnerably that you're an introvert. I definitely get my energy off of others, and so for me, COVID was challenging. I sort of didn't have the ability to thrive off the energy of others. And I remember very early on, when I was having a bit of a struggle in the first bit, writing in my morning journaling session, perhaps the purpose of this time is to spend enough time alone that I become my own best friend. And that was a really beautiful shift for me, in sort of seeing like I actually can create my own energy. I don't necessarily need to rely on others as much as I thought. And so then the inflection point that we've now been having more recently is, we're all now sort of reopening, our social circles, going out and being social again. And then, of course, in the work setting, a lot of companies are sort of figuring out how to navigate either this remote work world, the hybrid work world, going back to fully in person, whatever that looks like. And as we've seen, a lot of companies are taking very different approaches. We are now very grateful and fortunate to be in a position where we can actually help companies navigate what that future of work looks like. And so, it could be somewhat daunting and a little uncomfortable for you to now get back in person, maybe with someone that you've never met live. Are we shaking hands? Are we hugging? How do I look you in the eye? What questions do I ask you? There was like a great Saturday Night Live episode, a skit a few months ago, back last year, when everybody started, the vaccine was rolling out and people were beginning to go to parties again. And there was this whole like, awkward, how do I talk to, like, and people were just having a tough time communing with each other again. I believe that mindfulness is the key to more genuine and authentic human relationship and connection. And so we feel very blessed to be that partner that is helping teams connect with one another in that meaningful and vulnerable way again. And so I think that that is how we're seeing, the future of human connection take shape. I personally, we're very grateful that virtual took off for us, and 2020 and 2021 ended up being, by all metrics, pretty good years. Uh, I am so excited, however, to be getting back to in person, because I really don't believe.
Oh, well,
I
that's.
think
I
this
think
is what
this
a
is what a
Zoom
Zoom
bomb
bomb
is called.
is. Yeah, I've never seen one of those before, so we'll just boot them out.
Can we boot this person?
Yeah, do that.
All right.
Anyway, that's interesting. Yeah, I've
Can't
never had one of those before.
I can't say that was anything I'd experienced either, but thank you. He had an interesting name, Roger Stone, who is a public figure, a controversial one at that. But man, that so on the concept of personal connection, that was certainly a way to see that that is somebody who probably needs to just get out and be with other humans, because
Yeah,
that's what.
That'd be like
that.
East, 2.2 billion
dinner
people just
party.
got told they can't use certain words. They're announcing giant cult-like brainwashing. They're teaching 5-year-olds how to
Okay,
suck
we're
cock
we're we're
in
getting
public
all
school.
kinds of
They
fun
are
stuff.
sitting there doing everything you could ever freaking imagine.
Wow. Okay, we got double. Interesting.
We're
All right.
getting.
Well,
I think that sounded like Alex Jones, which was a
yeah,
fun
it
one. But
did.
hey,
Yeah, it did. I guess we will lock the meeting at this point.
let's lock it in, and that sounds good. No
Yeah. So
more
that was the
entertaining
equivalent,
intrusions.
right? That was the equivalent of like streaking through like a black tie event, right? And not and
Exactly.
knocking people's drinks down as you go.
And yet, I think that was perfect timing to say that we are now coming out of this looking for ways to re-engage in a unique way and seeking those, forms of personal connection. I wear a bracelet that is literally the chemical compound for oxytocin, which is the chemical that gets exchanged when we shake hands or we hug. And that's because I believe that, authentic human connection is sort of what's going to be the key to this. Let's be honest, COVID sort of created a bit of a mental health crisis, and I think we just had two interesting examples
Yeah,
of
exactly. I
people
think he
who
was in
were
his basement locked up for a little too long there.
a little too long there. So yeah, I really do believe that there's no replacement for in-person connection, and I truly believe that the best way to do that is through authentic relation and wellness and music and all the things that we, work with teams to create for one another, so that we don't have intrusions like the two that we just experienced.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That was fun, and I guess the future meetings I'm gonna have to lock people's audio. Like I said, that's a first for us. So one of the things I would really love you to go over, because I feel like when I started hearing about all of this stuff, the mindfulness, the grateful, all these things. It's so hard to put it into practice, in terms of in daily life. I have three little kids, and my excuse used to be like, oh, I don't have time to meditate, right? That was my big excuse. Or I
Hmm.
don't really know what to do to people talk about meditation and visualization and all. What does that even mean? So can you give me maybe an example of what your morning routine is, or maybe kind of what you pass on to people in terms of getting the day started? I feel like the morning is one of the most important aspects of all of this, right? Like how you start your day kind of it writes the story for the day, right?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll respond to is, people who say, "Oh, I can't sit and meditate. I have too much energy." There's a great Ram Dass quote, who's probably one of my favorite philosophers and thought leaders in the space in history. An amazing man. If you're not familiar with his work, I highly recommend anybody listening check him out. There's a bunch of great documentaries on him. But he says, if you can't sit still for 20 minutes, you need to sit still for 2 hours. And I love that, because so many of us, self included, said like, I wake up, I got too much energy, and I just need to get to work and start being productive. I feel like I, roll out of bed and turn my phone on, and I have a, litany of emails and text messages I need to respond to. First thing to answer your question on morning routine is put the phone in another room. I promise you, if you get it away from your nightstand, it will help you sleep better, and you will have your own personal time in the morning. So I have a 5 step morning routine that is what works for me. I think everybody's going to be a little different, but I will definitely share what works for me, in the hopes that, anyone listening who also is not a morning person, because boy, I am not at all. I'm happy to share, say that right off the bat, which is why I think this morning routine is so pivotal. First thing I do when I wake up is I flip on the Calm app and I meditate immediately. It is the very first thing. I close my eyes. I got off coffee about 4 months ago. I replaced it with an amazing product called Everyday Dose. I'm not sponsored by them. They are not paying me to say this. It is a functional mushroom latte that still has a little bit of caffeine in it, but it's also got a lot healthier things. So I kind of do like a little mushroom latte meditation where I'm closing my eyes and I sort of taking a sip. That's 10 minutes. I then move into breath work. Really love Wim Hof, who you might have heard of. He is known as the Iceman, and he's got a bunch of great online breath work, guided experiences that just really amazing to get you out of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, that constant fight or flight. I'm just, responding and reacting to emails and meetings and my boss throwing more work on my plate, etc. And then I finish that right into a gratitude journaling session, which I think is super powerful. You mentioned earlier starting your day with morning affirmations. I think whether it's affirmations or just starting to list 10 things that you're grateful for every morning, really powerful and just getting the mind into a really healthy, positive state. I then move into some sort of physical activity. If I have an early morning meeting, this could literally be 5 minutes of just moving my body, jumping jacks. I have a great little resistance band that I'm kind of traveling at the moment. This is a great little 4 braid resistance band that I can do an entire upper body workout every day. Yoga, as I mentioned, just opens up the heart, clears the mind. And then I've also been playing music for 20 years. And I know that if I, pick up a drum or beatbox or play guitar for just 5 minutes, it reminds me that, everything is good. And now I've completed this morning routine, 5 steps. Only then, if it's a good day, have I completed all of them, and now I'm ready to open up my laptop, start, getting back to email. But I give myself that gift of maybe an hour every morning before even looking at something that before even looking at anything work related. I give myself the gift of those. And I think we have a question. Can you please repeat that first step? Yes. The first step was meditation because I immediately need to just calm the breath, get out of that sympathetic and into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that tells the body you are safe, you are comfortable. There is nothing else that you need to do right now but breathe. The one that has been resonating with me the most is called Calm. It's an app that you can download. They have a bunch of free, versions, but I do pay for, I think it's like 12, $15 a month. And I begin every day with a 10-minute meditation in the morning, 10-minute in the afternoon, and then ideally 10 at night. If you want to sort of try it out before paying, I recommend another great app called Insight Timer. It's basically like almost a Yelp for meditation, where you can just get a bunch of user uploaded meditations and then sort of see the ones that have been rated really high. Give them a try. Close your eyes, find a nice quiet space to begin every day, and I promise you, anybody who says, "Oh, but I've never meditated before, it makes me nervous to think about it, I can't do it," give yourself a month to just commit to it every morning. I promise you will see the difference. There is nothing I'm trying to sell you on except your own peace of mind and productivity later on in your workday.
Yeah, Carmel, one of the things that, or one of the books I would highly recommend, which kind of got my wife. My wife actually was the first to do it and introduced me to it. And for me, I'm like, it's so hard for me to grasp concepts like this unless there's kind of like a step to step or a worksheet or something for me to follow along. At least in the beginning, for me to kind of get my wrap my brain around it. And there's a book called The Miracle Morning, which is fantastic,
Hmm.
and it's pretty easy to follow. And I do audiobooks more than read these days, just because I'm driving around, picking up kids, all those kinds of things. But the audiobook's great. It's entertaining. He does it, really well with kind of putting stories. He almost died in a car accident. He kind of like gives you all these great stories so that it's not boring, so you're getting a good story along with some really great stuff to kind of put into practice. I would start there, and then you can kind of I've massaged what they do a little bit in terms of making it work for me, but it's fantastic. So Miracle Morning, check that out. So Jonathan, going back to let's go back, kind of swing it back around to kind of the business side of things, because that's a lot of the people listening to this are either e-com entrepreneurs, or do some kind of marketing, or in the small business world. How do these kinds of things translate into growing a better business? Maybe being more mindful, being setting goals. How does this kind of translate into the business world?
Yeah, I love that question because, I think as anyone listening who's a busy entrepreneur, those are usually the people who are not, having a morning routine or not meditating or, even just forcing their teams to just sort of always be working and not actually investing in their own mental well-being. So, the first anecdote I'll respond to this question with is I remember we were having a prospective client meeting with a asset management company. And I remember the CEO said, "So how long do these client experiences go for?" And I could already tell I was talking to like a very type A, very business focused, very successful asset manager. Had a beautiful office in Tribeca in New York. And I said, it could be anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. It really just depends how long and comprehensive an experience you're looking for. And he said, "Wow, so that sounds like 30 minutes to 2 hours that my team isn't working." And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is a guy who this is going to be a very uphill sales climb in order to convert him into a client. And I started sharing that the evidence shows that if you just take 20 minutes in the afternoon after lunch, instead of reaching for that second cup of coffee, take 20 minutes, meditate, get up, stretch your body out, maybe go for a walk around the block. I guarantee you, you will be more productive in the afternoon. So yes, you're investing 20 minutes and you might think, but the opportunity cost, that's, 5 less sales calls that I can make and, one, whatever. You will see an increase in your productivity levels because you're more focused, because you're actually able to produce more during that afternoon, or if you start in the morning with that morning routine, which, by the way, to answer Vlad's question, Jonathan, how much time do you spare for that morning routine? In a good day, it could be an hour and a half to 2 hours. If I just need to sort of like, breeze through it, I'll try to do, because I have a morning meeting or a flight to catch, whatever, I can usually kind of get a pretty trimmed down version of it done in about 40 minutes. 10-minute meditation, 10-minute breath work, quick stretch, quick journal, and quick music. And so I think for those of us that are building teams, if you actually bring mindfulness into the workplace, which is obviously something that we're very, very serious about and focused on with our clients, you will begin to see that bringing, let's say you start that morning team meeting with a 10-minute meditation, or you bring in a yoga facilitator to help your team through a nice standing sequence that's going to help give them some postures that they can come back to when they have maybe a 15-20 minute break in between meetings. You are going to see a happier, more resilient, greater perseverance in your workforce. Because first of all of those things that we cited earlier, greater productivity, being more focused in their afternoon, that's all going to happen. But then you're also setting the tone for a happier, more well-rounded workplace. Your team then sees, wow, my boss really cares about how I'm showing up. They care about the workplace that I thrive in. They want to make sure that I'm not just, they're not just trying to extract as much value out of me, but they're actually really investing in my emotional and mental well-being, which of course then leads to all of these ancillary benefits like higher retention rates, people feeling like they could be more creative. There's a whole other conversation for another time, but we get out of the alpha state of thought, which is just that constant reactivity, feeling like we're just drowning in our email inboxes or in our Trello tasks or, our Asana, activities that we're just being reactive to the theta brain waves. And that's the part of our brain that actually is where creativity happens, where we get those entrepreneurial insights. If you're building a workplace that encourages your team to get into that theta work state through meditation, yoga, breath work, etc., you're going to, I believe, have much higher bottom line impact. And we see this from our clients. We always survey all of our clients over the course of different experiences that we run for them. And we see not only from the start to the finish of the experience, we do something called the emotional barometer, where we actually quantitatively assess how everybody is feeling at the start of the experience to how they're feeling at the end. And we then run that through a sentiment analysis tool where we could then tell clients the average score of sentiment of your team move from a 4.2 to a 9.5. And that's when any of the skeptics or non-believers go, wow, this really works. And we see how over time people are showing up more excited, they're more grateful. Week one might be, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed. By the end of an 8-week program, we see our clients completely turn around to building teams that are happier, that are showing up with more gratitude, and that of course has massive impacts for how they're actually able to produce for bottom line impact.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to think about too is I think you mentioned that you worked at Google. My brother-in-law did for a while there as well, and I got to go cruising around the campus. And one of the things that we were talking about, the corporate life's pretty rough, but one of the things that if you go into a place like Google or some of these Silicon Valley places, they have like sleeping pods and meditation rooms and all these things because they know that the 15 or 20 minutes that the employee is taken away from work to go do either of any of those things is actually going to boost the productivity, boost their how happy they are at work, et cetera, et cetera. They might even stay later, all these things where it's funny that you mentioned that asset manager. He completely doesn't get it because, the 20 minutes lost to for the employee to meditate, when they get back on the phone with the next client, their state of being, they're not, when you're talking to somebody, you can tell immediately, even by their voice, if they're frustrated or if they're tired or if they really don't want to be on that call, right? I mean, it makes a huge difference in terms of just the energy change when it comes to anything to do with business. Doesn't matter what it is.
I completely agree. And, I always then say to any of those skeptics, or in the case of the asset manager, would you rather invest 50, $100 in your employee, per employee for a wellness experience, or thousands of dollars in healthcare costs and lost time due to burnout and people who need to take sabbaticals because you've completely drained them of all of their energy? And that's when you sort of begin to see the light bulb go off and go, maybe the 40% turnover that we've had at this company over the last decade is because I'm burning my employees out. And then we begin to see, retention rates go up, healthcare costs go down, all the beautiful benefits of building a happier, more mindful workplace.
All right. So, with a lot of episodes, when we get to the kind of the end here, one of the things that I love to talk about is, we always talk about, what books, podcasts, people that have really made a huge difference in your journey, as not only for yourself as an entrepreneur, but like, maybe that you've passed on to clients, things like that. Any, YouTube channels, kind of anything that people can go seek out after we're done here that can kind of get them on the path to living a more mindful life?
Great question. Yeah. Kind of just answered stream of consciousness. Mentioned Ram Dass earlier. Truly one of the most, I think, magnificent human beings to have ever stepped foot on this planet. Read his books, watch the documentaries. A couple of books that have really helped me on my mindful journey, and certainly were some of the catalysts to leaving the confines of corporate America and following a more mindful path, going down to Mexico for a month and getting a yoga teacher training, etc. The Alchemist, I think, is probably one of the greatest books ever written by Paulo Coelho. You have The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, um, which is actually pretty cool because I brought that up a lot on the Peru retreat, which is where I met your business partner, Amy. Um, think The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer is absolutely phenomenal. Um, in terms of podcasts, I really love, I'm sure I'm not introducing anybody to this name, but I think Tim Ferriss, who I had the pleasure of being on a 10-day wellness retreat with last year um, in upstate New York. I just find the way that he perceives the world to be, absolutely brilliant. Um, I would say Aubrey Marcus, the founder of On It, really, really love his whole approach and everything that, he sort of challenges us on biohacking, which leads me to Dave Asprey, the creator of Bulletproof, also has a great podcast. The guys behind Mudwater, also really awesome podcast. And yeah, those are just a few of the things that are kind of coming to mind to rattle off at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ones I want to add to that is I think I've mentioned it before, but it's great. And Jonathan, I'm sure you probably heard of her, Brooke Castillo. I think her podcast is called like something about coaching. Um, and it's funny because, I do some coaching, but it's not like my main thing, but she is very great at, talking a lot about mindfulness and, just your state of being in terms of your day-to-day life. Anybody, I'm one of those people who I love politics. I love the news. I love to know what's going on in the world, but that stuff like grinds on you, right? So, once in a while, I really have to kind of force myself. And luckily, my wife kind of gets on me if I'm watching too much politics, geopolitics, all the stuff going on in the world. I like to be informed. I'm my brain just sucks in all the data and everything that, current events, things like that. But it's really good to kind of, off ramp from that stuff sometimes. And instead of being like, oh, I'm going to turn on the news or I'm going to read about, whatever in the New York Times or wherever you're getting your news from, you kind of just get rid of all those mainstream things and you just kind of go into the personal development world. You'd be surprised how much that will just change the way that you're being that day or even kind of change, if you feel like you're in a rut or things like that, just change your media for a week, start doing some Tony Robbins and some of these people that, will really kind of get your brain a little more rewired to get you back on the positivity track.
Beautiful.
All right.
And I see we
All
got just a question from Carmel. I just want to say it is spelled Ram Das. And I'll just throw that right in the chat.
Perfect. So, Jonathan, the other thing we would love is let people know where they can reach out and get more information from you.
Yeah, for those that are in our live Zoom, I'll throw the website right into the chat box. Flow and Tell, like show and tell, one of my favorite games from childhood, where we were all taught to just bring things in that we love and share without fear of judgment. So fun little play on words. Anybody who knows me knows my love for puns and cheesy dad jokes. So FLOWANDTELL.com. If you are looking to bring, wellness into your team, we would love to support you. We, are love being the wellness partner that are helping a lot of our clients from small startups all the way up to, Google, LinkedIn, Comcast, et cetera, help re-engage their workforce back into the workplace. Retreats, private experiences, we are here to serve all of your music, wellness, and art needs.
Awesome, Jonathan. Hey, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. It was awesome meeting you. Hopefully we can have you back again. I love, I love the e-commerce world. I love all that we do on this podcast, but sometimes we get a little too deep in that. And I love the fact that, today we're kind of covering more, to me, what I see is some of the most essential things to learn. Some of this stuff, if I would have known in my 20s, I've been doing entrepreneurial work for a really, really long time. And until you get yourself straight, you can't get your business straight. So, guys, this is probably one of the most important episodes you could listen to. Take it to heart. Don't be like me and be like, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to do this. You decide the time in your day. You are the master of your own time. As much as you want to kind of make the excuse that you're not, you guys take control of that time, invest in yourself, and you'll be surprised at how much more you'll get out of your business.
Couldn't agree more. And I'll also just add one more form of contact. Gave you the website. If you want to reach me personally, happy to answer any questions. It's just the letter J at flowandtell.com. Thanks again for having me, Andy.
Hey, Jonathan, thank you so much. And this episode will go down in history as well as being the first Zoom bomb that we ever experienced. I'm upset because we're gonna have to do a lot more editing on this episode as normal, but you know what? It is what it is. Jonathan, it was great having you. Hopefully we can see you again soon, and you have an epic afternoon, and take care.
Likewise, Andy. Thanks so much. Thanks to everyone listening. Have a great day.
All right, everyone. If you haven't done so yet, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Let your friends know what we're doing here. We really appreciate it. Please reach out if you have any ideas about the podcast. We love to get what you guys want to hear, what you guys want us to cover. So please reach out, Andy@sellerseo.com. As usual, I give that email address out. Please be quick and concise, though. I love when you guys are quick and concise. Even if you want help, I'm always there to help. Just make it quick and concise. Respect both of our times. Thank you guys, as usual. Everybody who joined us live, minus the Zoom bomber, thank you guys. And we'll see you next week on the Seller Roundtable. Thank you. All righty, everybody in the live stream, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. We do this live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time. Sellroundtable.com/live. Next week, we will not have any Zoom bombers, I promise.